5:33 on Wednesday, November 3rd. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us for Destination Management Plan update by Greg Oates and his team from NextFactor. Jim McKenna, our CEO from Roost, is with us this evening. And Jim, would you like to just give us an overview of how we got to where we are briefly? And then what we'll do is Greg's going to give a brief presentation. As we go through the presentation, you're welcome to put questions in the chat, and as appropriate, I'll ask Greg to answer the questions. I'll read them and Greg and his team can answer them. And then of course, we'll leave some time at the end of the presentation as well. We are recording this and we will save the chat. So speak up if we happen to miss something that you're interested in getting an answer to or more information on. James? Take it away.
Thank you, Mary Jane. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I think there's no question that the area has seen a lot of tourism over the last few years. And at times it seems too much, too many, and maybe too little emphasis on community efforts. So like a lot of organizations like ours around the country now, and even the world, they're taking a different approach and evolving to understand first that the travel industry is projected to continue to grow. And, it'll happen regardless of how individual towns, villages, states, countries deal with it. And to get ahead of the game, we have to really focus in a different way is what we're feeling. And what a destination management plan is about is really positioning the community first as we move forward and putting in the right mechanisms in place to save and maintain our culture, our differentiators, and make sure that we're positioned in a way that allows the community to get the most value out of the main industry, especially in our area. It's, some people say it's as much as 80% of our industry. So the team we brought in from NextFactor has good experience in this around this country and even outside of this country. So they've been working now for a number of months. I know, Greg and Shelley, you've had so many, I don't know how many people or different organizations you've talked to, but we're really looking for tonight to get more input. So as this moves to completion, there's more thought, more ideas, and we end up with a product that we can implement that does position the community first. That's all I got, Mary Jane.
Great. Good job, Jim. Greg, welcome, and we're going to let you take over the presentation and we'll go from there.
Okay, perfect. Good afternoon, everyone. It's good to be talking with all of you today. I've spoken with a few of you before. This is the second town hall that we've conducted. The first one was Monday. There was so much input and feedback on the actual strategies that I'm thinking this time we'll sort of shorten some of the background and provide more time for everyone to comment on the strategic framework, especially now because we have significantly more people on this call. So again, my name is Greg Oates with MMGY NextFactor. I'm joined by Shelley Green, who works with our company. Shelley was previously the CEO of the Durham Tourism Organization, Convention and Visitors Bureau. Plus we have the rest of our team that's working on this. We've done almost 20 destination management plans and worked with 300 plus similar organizations on various strategic plans, destination development plans, and etc. This is all we do. I put my email on this page. We can share that in the chat, but I just want to say that for any comments that aren't heard today, for any feedback you might have, we are open and just welcome any input that any of you might have as we finish up developing the plan. So just quickly to state what a destination management plan is, at a very sort of a basic level, it's balancing the needs of the industry and balancing the needs of the residents, right? And clearly, in a lot of really, really attractive destinations like yours, that's an issue, and COVID has accelerated that. But like Jim said, this is happening at destinations all over North America that are somewhat similar. 3 examples here of previous destination management plans, which are wrestling with some of those same balance issues. We define a destination management plan sort of more officially as a 5 to 10 year strategic roadmap that optimizes the interactions between visitors, the industry that serves them, the community that hosts them, and the environment. So really looking at those sort of 4 areas and looking at all the interrelated connectivity and how everything influences everything, and really trying to connect the dots and come up with a roadmap that's sustainable and equitable. In terms of community engagement to date, we've spoken with well over 100 people. We've done 9 focus groups, including a steering committee that we've met now with twice. We'll be sharing the outcomes of this session with them shortly, but they've really helped guide the entire process. Other focus groups, just all different segments of the visitor industry and the community. So we're trying to get as broad a spectrum as possible in terms of who we're hearing from. This is very much a destination-wide initiative that's both looks at the visitor industry and the destination overall. Just got off the phone with the Roost Staff Advisory Council, some phenomenal input there. So really trying to talk to as many people as possible. As well, we've done over 50 plus interviews individually with different stakeholders. And we've done these 2 town halls, and we'll be coming to the destination week after next to meet with more people and really try and get as good of grasp on all of the opportunities and challenges as possible. So I'm going to go right into the strategic framework. We have developed about 16 sort of key takeaways from all the engagement. That's been thoroughly vetted, I think, by now, and also we'll be sharing this deck with those takeaways afterwards, so everyone will have a chance to look at those. But you know all those, and when we shared them before, people said, well, this isn't, there's nothing here that's surprising. We know all of this. The idea of collecting those takeaways is to provide structure to the rest of developing the plan and really bucket all of those different areas and see where we need to look at things like housing diversity, age diversity, labor shortage, workforce development, transportation, all collectively, and really use systems thinking to think about all of those and how they're all interrelated versus just picking one off. So, and trying to talk about one at a time. So we put those takeaways together for that purpose, among others, and you'll see that in the deck when we share that afterwards. Really the key today is now to look at the strategic framework, and on Monday was the first time that's been shared publicly. We've been now working with all of you for 6-7 months, so this is important, but at the same time it's just a start. How the strategic framework, which is the objectives, strategies, tactics, how those look in the final plan could look a lot different. They could look the same, we don't know. This is a starting place, and what we want to get all of your input, at least at a high level today, and continuing on after this. So let's take a look at what that exactly is. When we talk about a strategic framework, this is really the meats, the guts, this is the deliverable, the recommendations for the plan. We have 6 primary objectives. Those are overarching themes that really cover the most critical and overarching themes relating to Lake Placid, North Elba, and the surrounding region. For each of those objectives, we'll have key strategies, 4, 5, 6. I don't want to go much beyond that. So key strategies for each of those objectives in terms of how we go about making improvements in those areas. And then for each strategy, and this is important, and this is what will require a lot of discussion with all of you and different organizations within the region about what are really viable, actionable tactics that we can include in the plan. Those are going to be maybe another 3 or 4 for each strategy. And we've also defined the outcome. What are we trying to achieve? What solutions are we trying to solve that we can solve as a community, and define those results, those intended outcomes for everything that we're talking about here. So for the rest of the call, we'd like to go through those top 2 things, the 6 primary objectives and the key strategies for each. the tactics and a lot of that is still to be looked at, but we want to sort of identify these areas first. So last time I went through all 6. I think now I'm going to just want to try different ways here, but go through each objective and get your feedback and input. What do you like? What don't you like? What doesn't make sense? What you think we might have missed? What you really do like? Any commentary or context or feedback that you want to give us for each of the strategies. First, I'm just going to show the 6 objectives, and then we'll get into each one individually. Diversify and optimize the economy. So we're talking about diversifying the economy to a degree within tourism. So increasing visitor spend, expanding when visitors come to the destination, diversifying that visitor volume. So diversifying the tourism industry to a degree, but really diversifying the economy beyond tourism, because 80+% of your overall economic activity, when it's made up by tourism, isn't necessarily very resilient. So trying to expand that into other industries. We'll talk a little bit about that. More conversation is needed with some of the economic development organizations to really drill down and identify exactly strategies relating to that. Now, we have increased long-term housing diversity as number 2. This is based on some recent feedback that it's so important. First of all, it was identified that it should be its own objective, but based on some recent conversations, that it should actually be number 2 to really drive this home for everyone in the community, in the region, to understand how important this is and how it impacts everything else. That's up for discussion. Previously, embrace a regional approach to improve sustainability, and thinking that, lake is in your name, right? And one of your names, Lake Placid, and looking at the quality of the water and thinking about how the watershed is evolving and what that will look like in 10 years and beyond, but to really identify that this is key to everything that's happening in the region, that watershed, that water system, and approaching it from a regional perspective is important, because it's pretty difficult just to look at 1 or 2 lakes and say, okay, we need to look at how the quality is evolving. It really requires that regional approach. That's the number 3.
Greg, to interrupt,
Yep.
I think at our meeting on Monday morning, there was a suggestion to include environmental sustainability.
Oh, you know what? You're right. And I did that on the individual page, but I didn't do it here. So I will. Thank you. What's also sort of come to the fore recently is that these first 3 are the big meaty ones, the really complex issues that will require what we call a whole of destination approach, or a community-wide approach, where you have the public, private, civic sectors, industry, government, community leaders, all working together to address these. And that's really sort of fundamental to everything we're talking about. But for these 3 specifically, there's no obvious answer. These are what we call wicked problems, but a lot of work here needed to look at pros and cons and what is viable strategy to address these. The next 3 are more approachable and more traditional in terms of some of the destination strategies that we work on. One is to develop a dedicated event management strategy, because events have been divisive for the community. So the thought was that earns its own place here as one of the primary objectives, to have that standalone strategy specific to events. Number 5 is to align investments in the destination to benefit both residents and visitors across all socioeconomic segments. So as money is funneled into the destination, and there's decisions made about how that can support the tourism industry, to also look at how does that impact and benefit residents as well, always looking at that through that dual lens, and that these are sort of investments that can benefit as wide of range socioeconomically as possible. And then the last one is really the destination marketing piece, but not just messaging to visitors, but also improving how the industry speaks to community, and being much more transparent and consistent, and sharing data, and really explaining all the things that are being done by the industry and by organizations invested in the travel and tourism to speak to the community more often and just better, but also leveraging platforms and leveraging modern strategies to improve messaging and marketing and engagement with visitors as well. So that's just the knowledge sharing or the communications, messaging, whatever you want to call it. So those are the 6 sort of overarching themes. Now we can start with the first and start getting some of your feedback. So for diversify and optimize the economy, I'm just going to go through what we have now, 5 strategies, and then would love to hear everyone's input. And you can start putting some input in the chat as we go if you want, and then Mary Jane can call some of those out. So in terms of diversifying the economy, one is you have a lot of different plans, ongoing, in development, recent, addressing every imaginable realm of what makes a community, from the private, public, and the civic sector, community organizations. And we've asked almost in every interview, do you feel like there's a shared sort of vision for the future of Lake Placid, North Elba? Generally, the answer has been no, not really. So just to align all of these sectors and bring all these different plans together and use this plan to try and tie a lot of those together. That's first strategy. Second will be to, Adirondack Park was founded on the idea of restoring the human spirit and body and mind and health and soul, and to really hold on to that and start looking at how the destination can be promoted more as a leader in health, well-being, active living. That's already being done, but there's so much demand coming out of COVID for those kinds of experiences that there's a lot there to play with potentially. And also part of this is to attract that, what we call a high value visitor, although that causes a lot of issues sometimes, that kind of language. High value visitor is a higher spending visitor, but it's also a visitor that aligns with local values, a visitor that comes at different times of the year, a business conference visitor, a corporate retreat visitor, kind of thing like that. When we start talking about these themes, health, well-being, active living, it speaks to that type of visitor. Number C, there's been a lot of talk around this. This is more focusing on all the investments in the sports events and venues and all the local professional expertise that's attached to that and that is in the destination. And this is really sort of economic development 101. You look where you have clusters of strength, both in terms of infrastructure and in terms of talent, and build on that. And you have a lot of that there already. You're getting more with the university games coming up. So how can that potentially support new industries or expand what's there? Sports training, human performance, youth development, longevity, education, organizational leadership, all those, and there's more. An example would be Adirondack Park Longevity Center, world-class institution for leading thoughts in how people of older ages can live healthier, more vibrant lives. There's already some of that, but how do you collect all that together and really create something special? So that's going to require some work with other organizations in the area. Attract a broader base of new full-time residents. So, to keep that constant flow of people learning about Lake Placid, North Elba, wanting to be full-time residents, being able to be full-time residents. Declining school populations brought up with this conversation quite a bit. So that's a key theme. And then this one was just added by the Roost staff about 2 hours ago. And I think it's important, and they brought it up before, but to create affordable opportunities for locals to patronize area attractions and experiences. One example brought up was if you live in Orlando, Disney offers 30% off for local residents. I believe some of this has been tried in the past, but it keeps coming up, so we wanted to include it in here. So that's the first one. Any comments in the chat about?
So there is one, Greg, and it's from the Lake Placid Central School, to be included in the conversations and planning. I know that we reached out to Roger Catania, who was the recently retired supervisor, and he's on the steering committee. And did you do any interviews with him? And I hear what you're saying, that plus representatives from Northwood School and St. Agnes School.
Right. I did those interviews. So yes, we definitely heard from people representing schools.
Okay, great. That's it so far. If we want to keep moving, feel free to jump in on the chat anybody on the phone whenever you're ready, or
if anyone wants to raise their hand on the.
it's hard to see that, Greg, when you're showing the slides, but we can do that when you stop this screen
Okay.
share.
Okay, so please continue to input anything in chat as we go through this. So that's the first one. Again, this can change. This is a starting point. We will see how this all evolves. Number 2, increase long-term housing diversity. This was recommended to be bumped up to number 2 because it actually was recommended to be number 1. But the overarching sort of purpose of a destination management plan is to optimize and diversify economy. So we want typically that to be number 1. So we have this as number 2. That could change based on feedback. We'll see. Increase home ownership options for a broader base of residents and establish incentives to develop alternative and more sustainable housing. So this idea of not just having more housing for workforce, for renting, but also to increase opportunities for home ownership at a broader range of price points. So looking at deed restrictions, a few other things. There are some developments happening now that will provide purchase options, but if a key part of this plan is to attract full-time residents and retain existing full-time residents and attract a broader age group of young people or families with children, then that home ownership opportunity is key. And also to look at other models of housing that are becoming more and more popular. Years past, people weren't always, governments and residents weren't always willing to look at alternative models, but the nation as a whole in many areas is hitting a tipping point where now suddenly some different types of alternative, smaller housing units, what have you, are becoming more acceptable. So just to look at those. Balance, a lot of talk about short-term rentals, as I'm sure all of you aware, and regulations and compliance and enforcement, but to balance that out with home ownership opportunities. So what does that exactly mean? Now, this is very simple and very vague. It's meant to be that way because we still have all of the tactics underneath that, and we need to continue to see what opportunities there are to do that. C is develop and convert residential and commercial building stock for permanent workforce housing as need is determined. So what buildings are already in existence that are underutilized or not being used at all? Where are there some low-hanging fruit potentially in that area to work with some of the building stock you already have? This has been a really interesting, this has grown in conversation over the last few months, but to develop a central database for workforce housing support across the region. So that people have an empty room here or there that might not being used, or just to identify where there is housing for full-time workforce and what that looks like, and have that in a database so that it's searchable, and just use some basic technology to develop that. And then this was also added recently, and there's been a lot of different back and forth on this, but looking at workforce housing from a bit more regional standpoint and thinking about some other areas where there is more availability of housing, but there's a lack of regular year-round transportation to help people get from some of those towns into Lake Placid and North Elba. But we've heard a lot of conflicting reports where it's not an issue. Others say it is an issue. There's also the fact that that might help workforce labor needs in Lake Placid, North Elba, but it won't necessarily help people who are already there but can't afford to stay there because of housing. So again, that's why we look at all of this in a very integrated way. But what exactly are opportunities to improve public transportation to help bring workforce from nearby regions into the area? So a lot here in terms of housing. Any comments related to that? Any inputting?
No, nothing so far. This is a quiet group compared to, how about adding improvements to transportation alternatives and create connections for the last visitor miles traveled? It's difficult for people to reach this area without a car, but so many other international communities provide transportation solutions from the airport and trains to town center and final destinations, shuttle, care share, bike share, etc.
Okay, this is a good point. We're going to save this and keep this. This is more focused for visitors. Right here in terms of long-term housing diversity was more for a local issue, but everything you say is true, and it applies somewhat as well for workforce. So thank you for adding that. Absolutely.
And then Greg, going back, I did miss something. I have communication coming in different places.
Okay.
But, going back to the, increasing, diversifying businesses in the community and the industry, there is the private investment through angel investing, such as Point Positive, which I don't know if Adele's on the phone, or on the line, but it's Point Positive is just that, private investors who vet potential startup companies and then financially support them. I
Absolutely.
hope I didn't kill that,
No,
Adele, but I hope that was an acceptable version.
that's completely
Sure,
understandable.
she could say it much better.
And that would be a good call to have potentially with Adele to discuss further.
Absolutely.
Okay, good. Anyone else? Okay. Just one more thought about this. This is increasingly the #1 challenge for communities all across the country. So it's something that a lot of organizations like Roost are needing to dig into and have a seat at that table and contribute ideas and solutions toward this. Okay, so next one, 3, embrace a regional approach to improve environmental sustainability. I'll make sure I add environmental to that landing page. This was a very interesting conversation with the environmental workshop and focus group and many other people across all of the different focus groups that we have spoken to and individuals. Someone mentioned that last year or this year was the first when they've seen algae blooms on Mirror Lake. That's a clear signal that that needs to bring more data to bear on what exactly is happening in the region. So the strategies related to this primary objective: collaborate with independent organizations to develop sustainability benchmarks and strategy. There are some of those here, some of those there. People are working in silos. All of these different environmental organizations are clearly passionate about what they do, but at times they're often fighting for different dollars. They're often advocating for the extremeness of the issues that they're dealing with. The idea is to have a region-wide sort of benchmark for a lot of what's happening and track those metrics year over year. So this is focusing a lot on the data side. And then based on that, all of these organizations, how can we build coalition with them and bring them together and start having conversations about pooling all of their resources and all of their strategies and working together to address environmental challenges, including climate change. It's been asked that we put climate change in there. This doesn't mean that everyone is going to fix climate change. It means to understand it and provide scenarios to mitigate some of the impacts and just plan for the future. And all these organizations that are doing all this great work, let's get them all around the same table. And the visitor industry can be instrumental in helping that, accomplishing that. You have an amazing network of trails and roads and going to all these fantastic different areas throughout the region, looking at how to invest in those to make people feel safer with regard to biking. There's a lot of animosity between vehicle owners and bicyclists, making that a more safe experience, improving education so everyone understands what's going on the other sort of side's head, looking at clean mobility options, but basically just trying to get people out of cars. And every destination is trying to do that. You have the perfect sort of setting for that. There just needs to be some capital investments in basic infrastructure regarding safety, but also how do you connect, where possible, trails and routes in town with trails out of town, and not just looking at that sort of hardcore biking experience, but just for visitors that want to just be out of their cars and ride around and explore the destination. And there's no shortage of data that also shows when you get people out of cars, you increase incremental spend in restaurants and retail, in other local businesses, and it just improves the overall destination experience, helps decrease pollution, et cetera, et cetera. And then last one here is to have some kind of oversight committee or stewardship committee or whatever, coalition, whatever you want to call it, to be a bridge between the tourism industry and the environmentalists and conservationists. And there's some of that here, some of that there again, but to really identify a body or bodies that can be liaisons between sort of these different, I don't want to say different priorities, because the visitor industry isn't out to, harm the environment, and conservationists understand the need for a sustainable economy, but just having that body that can kind of communicate between both and then communicate with the community. And there's actually some really good case studies for that around the US and Canada. Any comments there? This is a quiet group. Well, the last one was 8 a.m. Maybe everyone was just drinking coffee at the time. Anyone have any feedback on any of this? And if you don't like it, then by all means say, wow, this seems, we're going the wrong direction with this, that, or the other thing.
Well, I think one of the questions, and we can wait till we get through this, but it all sounds great. But then I think we should talk about the end, like, how do you really implement this? Like, a plan is great, but implementation is really the key to success. But I'm sure we're going to get to that.
Okay.
And we don't have to talk about it in the middle of your presentation, but just thought I'd throw that out there to mix it up a little.
No, perfect. Okay. So it's kind of interesting. It might help, at least it's helping us for now, to break these down, that those three are the big, audacious, sort of overarching, complex themes that really everyone is talking about. The next three are somewhat more straightforward. The next one is focusing on events and what's that do, what events are doing in the community in terms of love it, hate it, whatever the reactions are. There's a lot of different reactions to the events. Meredith said, not so much quiet, but reserving my reactions. Okay, thank you, Meredith. Look forward to hearing from you. The Ironman was a good example. It was time to re-up the contract, and Bruce held a community forum, which was something that was somewhat new in a way. People had a chance to weigh in, but just the passion and the media that came out of the Ironman, it was just I think sort of a prelude to what we're talking about here, but to have an actual strategy and get community buy-in in terms of how decisions are made. So the strategies around that is to create an actual event management plan, but with input from residents, government, and industry. Everyone that's impacted and influences events in some way, everyone that touches events, who lives there, give everyone a say to create a dedicated event management plan. But also to have an events council, again, we'll play with the language, but some kind of oversight body that is made up of residents, government officials, potentially industry leaders, who can communicate back to really everyone about what's being done to balance the needs of the events industry and balance the needs of the community in what's seen as the most fair and transparent manner. And just have that conversation and someone to help lead that conversation. There has been some event sort of committees before, but just to build that up. And there's a lot of interest from both event industry people and residents to be involved in something like that. This is vague, but important, and we can identify what that exactly means as we move forward. But every event has a lot of sort of hidden costs, hidden burdens, or just open costs in terms of security, waste management, administration. Hosting an event costs a lot of money. The municipalities are paying extra money to cover these events. So how can event revenue potentially be expanded? When there's an event, how can you look at dynamic pricing or new sponsorship opportunities? We talked earlier about expanding industries, how could they potentially become event sponsors, bring more partners in, what have you, whatever the strategy is, and there's a lot of them, just really focusing on optimizing the visitor spend when it comes to events to cover the cost of those events. So that's monies that will be really directed towards the people who have to bear the costs, and the public sector that has to sort of steer all of that, public works, what have you, all that. And then to look at, again, so much of this comes back to data and better data management platforms, but to have those tools to measure the economic and community impacts every time there's a major event, or maybe it's on a monthly basis or an annual, or however that looks like. But to start from a more educated standpoint when we're having all these conversations about really what were the impacts of that event in an empirical way as possible. Lori Fitzgerald said,
Yeah, I wanted just to mention before you get to that, Greg,
okay,
above that, there was the mention that, we just need a fair balance between home ownerships and short-term rentals, which bring people in and help drive the economy. And then to go on to say that, younger generations don't necessarily want to stay in the traditional hotel rooms. So that is part of finding that balance and, making sure that we still have a healthy neighborhood community, as well as offer what the traveler is looking for, right? And so that's part of the,
yep,
I don't know what number that was, 2 or 3, whatever number on the,
That was
as far
2.
as 2.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
then I just wanted to mention, Greg, you remember that we had talked about that we did have that event committee at one time.
Mhm.
So Lori Fitzgerald was on that events committee, and it just failed to gain traction because of the lack of participation. But, Lori, maybe that was just a little bit before its time. And now maybe with a different structure and a different timeline, like remember how we started like once a month, and then we went to quarterly, and then went to as needed, and then it went away. Is that how you remember it? Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Lori. And we see home ownership and short-term rentals. Younger millennial generations don't want to necessarily stay in traditional hotel rooms. It's such a big shift there, especially coming out of COVID now, like really understanding how consumer behavior is changing, intention to purchase, how people are traveling, why they're traveling, what people want to get out of travel. There's been some significant shifts during COVID. We've all had 18, 19 months to reassess a lot of things. That includes travel purchase behavior. So that will be included upfront in the plan. Okay. Do you want to comment on this?
Yeah, and then yeah, Val's just saying we've tried it before. Edfinity did it, and then the Development Commission tried it. So I think the point is we've tried some type of event committee in the past. We just have to look at maybe, not doing the same thing over and over, expecting, different results. We just have to look at it differently and figure out the best formula for this to be successful. And I will say that during COVID, Jim can reiterate that we had many calls with event organizers, right? And so the event organizers were eager to come to the table at the time, trying to figure out what it looked like for them in Lake Placid to host events from Can-Am to rugby, lacrosse, Ironman, horse show. So I think, again, I think COVID has changed things, and this could be one of the things that comes back to the table a little bit more successful than it was in the past.
Okay. And looking at this, how this was structured in the past, and looking at potentially some new org charts for this kind of endeavor. Okay. That is 4, 5. Now, this really relates to what's typically called destination development, but development is a word that's not perceived all that positively a lot of times, but we're talking about that in the terms of economic development and growing aggregate income and revenue for the destination and individual income for residents. That's really what we're talking about. There will always be a new investment in any region. If a town or a village or any kind of region isn't growing, then it's dying. There's no perfect sort of stasis, static level of just wonderfulness where everything is in balance. So there'll always be some kind of evolution of a destination, let's put it that way. But as investment decisions are made in terms of how a destination evolves, just ensuring that benefits both residents and visitors, and that this affordability issue isn't just regarding homes, but that these experiences and things that are being developed can be something that is, or opportunities that are open for a wider breadth of socioeconomic segments. So someone, it was mentioned the last couple of days that, I live here, but I can't afford to do a lot of these sort of participate in a lot of these, like the bobsled run or different Olympic sports. Someone else said, there's no way I can afford a ski pass. I've lived here, for 2 decades, and I can't afford to buy a ski pass for my family. So looking at things such as that. The actual strategies that we have sort of proposed so far and that have been vetted a couple of times now, develop the region to be a recognized world-class leader for outdoor recreation and wellness with an emphasis on all types of road and trail biking. It's been brought up multiple times, especially in the outdoor rec and some of the individual interviews, that you have literally a world-class outdoor recreation infrastructure related to biking and trails. Trail biking has just exploded in popularity, and it's been said that what you have is of equal quality to Vermont and Moab and some of these other popular destinations, but there isn't necessarily the reputation for that. So that's a lot of storytelling, also a lot of mapping and wayfinding, how you can participate in all of this, using mobile friendly wayfinding and mapping, but also really looking at the opportunities in terms of the market here and these people with some very high-end bikes, and how you see more and more visitors with some significant discretionary spending now looking at this type of experience when they book vacation. So throughout this whole process, optimizing visitor spend, so not necessarily more visitors, but visitors who spend more money, has been always sort of there as we've been developing a lot of these ideas and strategies. Another one is, this has been really following along with the local arts and culture community, the creative maker economy, entertainment, but this idea that, we have all these things that we're doing here related to the arts and culture, but it always gets way overshadowed by sports. And it's been said a couple times by people in this community that, the idea that people don't come to Lake Placid for arts and culture is just plain wrong. There's that. And then there's also this idea that traditionally, whenever you talk about optimizing visitor spend, it's culinary and culture. Those are two things that visitors want, the visitors will spend money on, the visitors will go out of the way to find, that they'll stay longer in a region. So it's all about, again, increasing that economic impact of the visitor economy, and arts and culture is right up there at the top. Likewise is culinary. Every place is a foodie destination. Everyone is a foodie to some degree. Food is the last analog experience, it seems, left in the world. It's something that everyone will pay attention to. It's great for content. It's great for marketing. The people involved in this, we're not just talking about restaurants, but farmers markets and food festivals and culinary grocery stores, events, all of that is just really, really great content to engage visitors. And you have all that, but it's connecting that entire food system together for vendors, suppliers, the whole value chain there, and sharing that with both locals and visitors. And then this last one here, develop and invest in Main Street initiatives and other community projects like community centers for the community, but also potentially for visitors, but to really create that sense of place. One of the key takeaways was that there's a lack of sort of a sense of community. Do you know who your neighbors are? That's changed, that's evolved over the years. There used to be a very strong sense of community. That's not there anymore. So this speaks to some of that and also the Main Street initiative speak to the culinary and cultural themes that we have above that. So this is really in terms of aligning and optimizing investments in the destination. We have 4 here. I think there'll be some more joining this one. Any comments on that?
Greg, before we get to the comment, I think it was interesting at the meeting at 8 o'clock, and I'm sorry, I don't have the notes in front of me, but the destination that really they were the self-proclaimed, mountain bike destination of the world. And they incorporated all the different outdoor arts and sculptures along those trailways. So they kind of blended the arts and the outdoor experience. I thought was a very cool idea. And not to say that that should replace our art centers or expanding on our, the arts culture specifically, but I like the idea also of marrying them when it's appropriate.
That was Bentonville, Arkansas, and they've called themselves the mountain bike capital of the world, self-proclaimed.
Can I, sorry, I have a hard time with typing everything out. Is it okay to just make a comment on this online?
Sure. Yeah,
So,
sure.
this is regarding 5B in the local arts and supporting the culture. And it goes back to, I think, the first objective, which is the economic diversity. I just think it is really important to support the local arts and culture and entertainment and make that, obviously the outdoor rec sports is our baby and that's what it's bringing people here, but there's such an opportunity to add more support to the arts and culture and entertainment to support that. And because there's families that come, they all have different interests, and we've got a long history with the Sinfonietta. The Arts Alliance was recently formed to help promote that part of the comprehensive plan. Songs at Mirror Lake is a huge draw and has a lot of strength. And the farmers market is got a lot of traction. I just think there's a lot of opportunity there. And back to that first objective where you're investing in the sports venues and things like that, I think if we can invest some in the arts as well, it's only beneficial, which is kind of what you were just saying, Mary Jane, but I just wanted to add the comment to that.
And then, there's 2 other things, that I think Tate has a good point that, to add to the list, like thought leadership type events, think tanks, and going think tanks in regards to climate change and, bring back winter. I mean, there is the potential in our future that our winters won't be what they used to be. And what does that look like for our future? And then the other thing specifically to this slide is being remiss if we didn't focus on addressing accessibility as part of this section.
Yeah, that's a great point. We will do that. Thank you.
And also, diversity of the people that visit. I mean, we talk about diversity all the time, but when you looked at the statistics, we're 95% white in this county, and the world is changing. How do we have to always keep that focused as well, I believe.
And some of this speaks to that when we're talking about arts and culture, and we're talking about food and beverage and culinary and sharing all of this around.
So Lori has 2 good comments that I don't want to lose. So the Community Development Commission has a team working on culinary as an identifier for us, as just one example. So, that should be part of the conversation that we're having as we develop this plan. So there's just an example of the disconnect, like, we're doing this, but we don't know that they're doing that. And then Lori also said, and maintaining what we do create, making that investment. So
yeah,
Lori,
and sorry, I unmuted Mary Jane to
please,
sort of
please
follow
do
up.
unmute.
I think, the Community Development Commission has a lot of initiatives that are working against all of what we're seeing here, to Val's point, to implement the master plan or the comprehensive plan. And so I think there needs to be better alignment between all of this and that and us, because so that we're not duplicating effort and we're not trying to recreate the wheel in two different ways. And what the Arts Alliance specifically has found is that we're really good with coming up with new ideas and finding grant funding to build things, and then we let them fall apart because we don't take into account that we need to maintain them. The Olympic art being just a classic recent example of that.
And Lori, when we were talking about initiating this destination management plan, we did have several conversations, Greg, you'll remember, with Dean Dietrich. And the conversation was that this would be step one in the comprehensive plan.
Agreed.
So that this management plan would fold into the comprehensive plan.
Agreed. But in the interim, the Community Development Commission isn't standing still. So a lot has happened. And I think that during the course of the past year and a half, even with COVID, the Community Development Commission and all of its subcommittees, arts, appearance, housing, have made serious strides moving forward in trying to tackle some of these things, so as not to be stagnant and not to wait till everything else is done. So there is movement, and all I'm suggesting is that we should just communicate about that movement. And the plan is the plan, and there's nothing wrong with that. We should just communicate on that movement so that we don't end up going off in two different forks in the road.
And I will say that, one, I absolutely agree. We need to update where you are with some of these initiatives. And the plan is not necessarily the plan. Like, this is a work in progress, and this is, needs to be embraced by everybody, or as many people as we can. So if things need to be adjusted or edited, then that's what we're here to do. I mean, we probably won't get to it tonight, but Greg, how would you suggest we handle that?
Well, specifically for the Development Commission and
Yeah, all the things that they've been working
Right.
on that impact this plan. We
So-
definitely want to.
we've been in touch with them throughout this entire process. They've been part of our meetings. We were talking with them today. We have a meeting set up for next week. And when we're there the week after that in person, we have a 90-minute meeting to go through all of this. We haven't spoke to them about these specific strategies yet because we want to vet them internally. And now that they're sort of been discussed, we're going to get into the more at a more granular level with the Development Commission over the next couple of weeks. But 100%, the whole purpose of this is to support everything that's already happening in the destination. Absolutely.
Yeah, and so I'm just going to add two things, and I'm going to mute myself again because I don't want to railroad the meeting. One is that I think when I say the plan is the plan, this plan is going to come before the comprehensive plan rewrite. And I'm actually not aware of any meetings with the Community Development Commission and you guys, but that doesn't mean that I just don't know yet. So
We just started talking about them today, so we haven't formalized.
okay,
anything,
perfect.
but
Okay, great. Thank you.
that
And
will be
then
good.
John Hutler said that, developing the arts and culture goes beyond arts installation. It's, building arts, culture, entertainment, year-round economic engine. Arts come to work, perform, live here, and attract like-minded enthusiasts to visit. Absolutely. Right.
And yes, and I meant to include in my list of things as part of the arts that the film festival was a big success this year, and it's included in that. So sorry, John.
Okay, I think we're good.
Okay, so yeah,
And Meredith's saying that it needs to be affordable as well, to have a vibrant arts community. It needs to be affordable.
We've also had Haley Breen, the community development person, involved in most of the meetings throughout, too,
Yes.
which is good.
yeah. Just to build on that arts and culture, that's what also gives a destination really its community identity, and talking about the values of the community and what people in the community are focused on. It's just another way to engage visitors when they're here beyond the sports piece. There's also one other interesting conversation that the arts and culture theme here is not just about driving visitor spend and local spend to organizations involved in the arts and culture, but there's also that raising donations, which is often significant. And there used to be a very strong philanthropic sort of spirit in Lake Placid that isn't quite to the degree what it is, but these are people that do want to donate to the arts, and bubbling this up and getting locals connected more with the arts and culture community can support those donation efforts, which benefit the community overall. So that's 5. Last one, 6, improve community and visitor engagement for all audiences. That just means we need to basically tell everyone's story better to everyone else. And when we focus from Ruth's standpoint, there's always been sort of developing messaging and communication and marketing towards that visitor to drive demand, but using that same skill set and the same tools to now speak as well to residents more intentionally and effectively, and explain everything that's happening in the destination, the things that are being done to balance the visitor industry and the local quality of life and all of that, and really leveraging data much more effectively as well to do that better. And the quality of data management tools for destination organizations over the last couple of years have really improved exponentially, and they're much more affordable. So leveraging that type of business intelligence, not just for the organization and for the visitor industry, but really leveraging that kind of data as a community engagement tool so that everyone sees how things are evolving from a more educated and empirical standpoint. So diversity, equity, and inclusion is so critical now for any destination. So really this first one speaks to that, but to support local organizations committed to working with students, youth, elderly, people with disabilities, all underserved community segments in the region, anyone who needs exposure for some of the things that are being accomplished to improve quality of life for people in the community that might be overlooked, whatever that is, for the visitor industry to support those local organizations, to bring those people into the industry, to have them contribute and benefit. But whatever that looks like, but this is exactly speaking to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and using the tools of the visitor industry to provide more exposure to the needs of a broader base of the community. Letter B. So every single destination master management plan ever developed always advocates that there needs to be people to help steward this plan. The whole point of this plan is to drive and optimize visitor spending, to bring more money and resources into the destination, to attract talent, to attract full-time residents. There's a lot of ROI here. So some monies need to be extended to help steward this plan. And so that might be a position in community relations. That's typically one of the positions that's required, but really to sort of own this plan within an organization and then help build coalition and champions around it. That's automatic for any plan like this. As well, same thing, automatic. The tourism website, there's a lot of opportunities to improve that in different areas and segment it more and target more types of segments at a more nuanced level. There's just all kinds of opportunities here. The biking one especially has been brought up, but how do you really hold someone's hand, talk to them like they're 5 if they're new in the destination, say, look, this is all the amazing ways to navigate this destination. Few organizations do this as well as they can. So looking at that, but also highlighting all those assets for locals as well, so that it's a community-friendly website that locals use. Often there's a different sort of strategy to engage locals, but it's been brought up over and over that a lot of locals, especially new people moving into there, have no idea of all the many different things happening across the region. That's C. And then the last one is just looking at the success of that forum for Ironman and other similar ones, and ones we've seen in so many other destinations, but having those forums, those opportunities for people to speak in a public, transparent manner and get people out of all of these Facebook groups and coffee shops and tea houses and, over on someone's porch. Like, if you have something to say it in front of everyone. And when that happens, then you start seeing people say, okay, I hear you, I disagree, but okay, I'll give here, I'll give there. But just to get it out in the open. And that's when you really start seeing shifts in terms of sentiment and attitudes. Not for everyone. There's always going to be, people that will disagree with whatever's put out there. But just the idea of building community and getting people talking out in the open about things that affect everyone. So that's the fourth and last one for number 6. So that is it in a nutshell. Went over that very quickly. A lot of work went into this. Any more comments?
Not at this time, and anybody that wants to, I think we can stop sharing the screen, Greg, if you want. If anybody just wants to unmute themselves, if they have anything, and I think it would be good, Greg, also, what are the next steps? I think it's
Right.
good to share that.
Okay. So next steps, now that we've had the 2 town halls to go through this, we're going to tweak some things that we heard tonight. And then we want to start sharing that with all of you so you can take a deeper look at that. Our emails will be on that if you want to reach out, or you can always speak to Ruth to start, making this public. Then now we're also going to start reaching out to, and we already have started, like the Development Commission, ORDA, share with some other community leaders and start getting feedback in terms of, okay, how do we actually build strategies that are viable and that will be effective? And now we want to go one deeper layer into that sort of implementation level and, the actionable initiatives to understand what will work. Then we'll be in the destination to, again, have more meetings and see more of just sort of the overall landscape of the area. And then following that, we continue to vet everything with all of the people we're working with, and we'll start actually developing the plan to be completed by the end of the year. So that's sort of a rough outline of.
So just so it's clear, so you're going to continue to work on the plan from the feedback that you've gotten from the 2, we call these town halls, the virtual meeting today and then the one Monday morning. Then you're going to you're actually going to be here from the 15th to the 19th of November. You'll be meeting with different entities, touring, getting a better sense of the community, working with the steering committee, which there are about 30 community members on the steering committee. And then from there, you kind of come to a full plan, completion of a full plan.
And then after all that's done, while we're writing the plan, we want to have one final visioning workshop. And that will be, we still need to identify who will be in that audience. It'll be the steering committee, and most of you, I imagine, would be invited. So it's really for stakeholders, a lot of industry stakeholders. And then we kind of have a final look at everything. So we want to have that sort of final vetting. Again, we'll listen to more feedback. Typically, that is something that you would want to do in destination, so everyone can really take the time to look at it. But because of COVID, it's a challenge, of course. So we've been doing a lot of visioning workshops remotely via Zoom, but these are fairly lengthy, so we'd probably have to break it into a couple 90-minute sessions. But that's a final look for everything, and then that gets sort of the seal of approval. It then goes back to the steering committee for their sort of final sign off. And then we start looking at how it'll be ratified with local town council.
And for everybody that's on the call, if you're not part of our email list, you can go to roostadk.com and sign up at the bottom so that you do get our communication. And if you are on Facebook, if you follow us, it's the Regional Office of Sustainable Tourism. We also post a lot of information in regards to meetings and next steps and the plan itself and where we're at. So they're not perfect ways to communicate, but that's where we are right now. So please, I put the Roost ADK in the chat. Oh, and so did Michelle. There you have it. She did a better job.
Yeah, Greg, I just wanted to comment on, really, I guess it's the first one, optimizing the economy and diversifying the economy. I'm not sure that you explained it the same way you did the other day, but it's really taking advantage of our expertise in the sports world and transferring that to other industries. And that is we think you think is a strong mechanism to really get some new population bases here and then get known in some of those areas similar to how we're known in the sports world. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. And to build that sort of, and I don't know what kind of language we want to use here, but that middle income base, that entrepreneurial base, also for year-round businesses is definitely of interest in how all of this can contribute. I mean, there are quite a few case studies from Whistler to Colorado Springs to Tahoe, other destinations that have hosted the Olympics, how they've leveraged all of the economic activity around that to support talent attraction and economic development to help sort of level out the economy so is not so dependent on one industry, and it's not so up and down depending on seasons.
I think Meredith wants to comment.
Hi.
Hi.
I wanted to just save my comments for the end because I was curious. I wanted to get the sum of the whole as opposed to just commenting as I went. A little bit about me. I moved to Lake Placid just over 15 years ago to work in Saranac Lake at the community college. So I would say that I'm pretty attuned to the socioeconomic status of local residents of the Tri-Lakes. I chose to live in Lake Placid because, to me, at the time, Lake Placid seemed to have the most vibrant community. And at the time, the events in the community enhanced the community feel. It has morphed in the last 5 to 10-ish years to that the community is just the sum of its events. And that's off-putting. The increase of the destination as a spend is off-putting. And the push and pull that you feel between locals on Facebook and what you're hearing in regards to affordable housing and staffing shortages and a bunch of other different things is because I think that some events happened in history, and I wasn't involved in any of them. I used to go to almost all the community events. I don't go very much anymore. There's generally not very many locals there. But the reason that you feel this locals versus tourist push or locals versus absentee short-term rental landlord push, or that push and pull and that divisiveness that you referenced early on, is that Lake Placid hasn't done a good job to balance tourism with community building and consensus. And I think what you're hearing from locals is, do we need more large scale events? Do we need to be more of a destination than we are? Or is it a better idea to right size where we're at? And how do you grow? Is growing just meaning like the almighty dollar? Is that really what all we're about? And I do think that we've lost a lot of community in Lake Placid. And I just, those are my comments, and take them as a grain of salt, what you will. The whole thing left a little bit of a bitter taste in my mouth, if I'm being honest.
Thank you, Meredith. Jim or MJ, do you want to comment?
Yeah, well, just saying, I think too, more words about destination than community in the presentation. I felt that as well. And, I think that the attempt we're trying to do here, Meredith, is try to wrap our hands around that. As you said, you came 15 years ago, and at that time, it was about economy only. And I think that as times have moved on and things have changed, we are starting to feel that it is necessary to address the points you just made. And we think this step is a process in getting back to community. So, the pressures and challenges that have happened with the combination of, tourism growth, event growth, and short-term rental growth has changed the fabric. And it's as someone said earlier, I don't know who my neighbor is.
But also, I think too that we have.
You're lucky to have neighbors. I don't have neighbors.
Exactly.
I have one neighbor.
But I also think that we have to, reinvent our future, because we can't go back. There is no such thing as going back. And so what we're trying to do is create a path forward that we can get some of the pieces back that we've lost, and that sense of community and the sense of balance. And again, it's a work in progress, and the true success comes from us all working together positively. And I agree with you. Social media has its place, but it is turned into the voice instead of coming to the table. And a lot of times that's not productive. It actually just has more of a negative impact. So those that really care are here tonight and Monday, and hopefully more will join as time goes on.
But now's the time, at least for this plan, to get all the thoughts in and get all the concepts in, no matter if they're, difficult to express or if they're difficult to hear. This is what we're trying to do, and that's part of the process we feel is necessary right now.
Meredith, everything you said, and thank you for sharing that. But from the very beginning, that has really been at the forefront of everything that we're trying to do. And it's informed all of the questions we've asked. It's informed everything we shared tonight. So, I mean, you just basically stated the why behind the development of this plan. So just thank you for that. We're past time now. Do we want to keep talking, or should we call it a night and then share this with you, and we can continue, to get people's feedback if you want to. I think that might be the best way to proceed here. So I just want to thank you all for joining. We'll put this together, send it to MJ and Jim to be sent out to all of you. And I think this has been really valuable, just hearing from everyone and getting this feedback, and just also hearing how it sounds when we're getting it out into the public realm now. This is the first, couple of days that we've shared all of this after 7, months of work. So it's been productive, I think. Jim, MJ, anything else?
Brent, I would just like to say one thing, and I've sat in on a couple of your sessions, and I'm very impressed. I think you do a really good job. You listen very well. And I've listened to you repeat back some of the things that were told to you months ago. And it's impressive to hear how well you observe that, how well you absorb this. And I think you're doing a great job. I just want to say that.
Oh, thanks, Val. I appreciate that. Absolutely. Okay. Well, good. That should be it then. Jim, MJ, anything else?
No, it's time to wrap it up. It's 6:45.
Okay.
I want to be done. I'm sure everybody else wants to carry on. Thank you, everybody, for
Maybe
joining.
we
Have
can
a-
get Meredith's contacts, or maybe Greg, a chat with Meredith might be good.
No, Adele, Lori, and Meredith, I definitely want to follow up with, and we'll absolutely, that would help.
So how will we get, I have Adele's email. Lori's, I don't have Meredith. Meredith, do you want to, you can send, oh, and there she is.
Okay.
All right.
I got it.
All
Great.
right.
All right. Thank you,
Have a
everyone.
great night.
Thank
Thank
you.
you,
Bye.
everybody.